and it gets voters' attention, it gets political leaders' attention. The last thing they wanted to do was have to pull out of a big market like that. So nobody wins if the insurance company can't afford to sell insurance and the homeowners can't afford to buy insurance.
Hello, everybody. This is Blair Bartlett. I'm the Vice President of Government and Political Affairs at the Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers. Welcome to the Leader's Edge Politics and Risk podcast. I am excited to share this conversation with you guys that I had with Chairman Bruce Westerman. He's chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. But first, I want to introduce our newest government affairs team member, Audra Jackson. Audra Jackson is our new Director of Government Affairs.
Well, thank you, Blair. I'm so excited. This is my first podcast. So as just a podcast fan, I'm excited to be on ours. So I'm Audra Jackson. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I love the state of Texas. I'm a great Texan woman. I have been in DC almost 10 years. So I got my start in politics through Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, the late Congresswoman. I got to intern in her district office when I was in college in Dallas. And then I got to work in her DC office, intern and work in her DC office. I also worked for Linda Sanchez, and I worked on the House floor in the Democratic cloakroom for Speaker Pelosi and Leader Jeffries. And most recently, I just came from the White House Office of Legislative Affairs for President Biden. And so that experience has just been able to really help me in this new lobbying job. When I was in the White House, I said I was the president's lobbyist. So the president had 5 House lobbyists, and I was one of them. And in that role, I got to work across the aisle. I had 40 members of the Democratic caucus and then 40 members of the Republican conference that I got to work with. And actually, Bruce Westerman was one of them. So it's really cool. I feel like I'm almost in a full circle moment, and I've been able to build from every experience. So it's pretty cool.
And I would say, I didn't realize, I thought it was 40 members total. I didn't realize it was 80. You had 80 members out of 535, 40 Democrats, 40 Republicans. What were you assigned specific issues or committees?
So I was assigned committees. So my committees were House Natural Resources, the House Agriculture Committee, and the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. So that's how I got to work with Congressman Westerman. I also was assigned, each side had like a caucus they work with. So I got to work with the Congressional Black Caucus as well, which was pretty cool.
Excellent. And so today, folks are going to hear an interview that we did with Chairman Bruce Westerman. He is the current chair of the Natural Resources Committee. He represents the 4th District of Arkansas. So he has an interesting background that we kind of start the interview off with that we just don't come across a lot. We come across a lot of public service backgrounds or military backgrounds, and he's a background in engineering and forestry, and he has just a really, cool perspective that we don't hear a lot. But the reason I wanted him on this podcast is because he's been shepherding this landmark legislation through Congress, starting last session in the 118th and continuing in the 119th, called the Fix Our Forests Act. And this legislation essentially revamps U.S. forestry management and how we look at that and how we respond to wildfires on the federal side, and how we respond to wildfires on federal, public and tribal land. And so I think it's, you can tell from how he speaks that he loves trees.
Yes.
And it's, it's just a refreshing perspective that I hope our listeners appreciate, because he has to work bipartisanly as a chairman to get things done. He did that overwhelmingly with this bill last Congress and this Congress, and hopefully, this Senate has it on the right path to do that. They just didn't get to this legislation last Congress, and hopefully they do this time. They have some good champions already, bipartisan champions, and the industry, the insurance industry is supportive of this legislation because it looks like how to responsibly and quickly address, culling out forests of dead trees, how to respond, how to what's the proper mitigation that you can do on federal land? And even it looks at, how do we kind of cut the red tape a little bit, so that the federal government is better able to respond and react to wildfires. And so I hope everyone enjoys the podcast with Chairman Westerman. Thank you, Chairman Westerman, for joining us. You represent the 4th District of Arkansas, but you're also the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. You're a busy guy because you're also on transportation and infrastructure. Describe your district a little bit. You actually have a big part of the state of Arkansas. What are your biggest cities there?
My hometown is Hot Springs, and it's the city center of the largest county in my district. I've got 33 counties in my district, and to put that in perspective, there are 75 counties in Arkansas. So geographically, I've got over 40% of the state, and there are 4 members of Congress. So that tells you that I've got a large rural district. It's a very beautiful place. I've got the Ouachita Mountains and the Ozark Mountains. Got the Buffalo National River, which was the country's first wild and scenic river that starts in my district. Got beautiful lakes, wonderful timberland, a lot of ag land. But again, it's very rural. Okay. And it encompasses a lot of the southern part of the state and the western part of the state into the northern part of the state.
Okay. So yeah, the natural resources is a good fit for the district and your background. And you have an interesting background. And I'd love to know, I'd love for you to share how you got into forestry and also politics, and then how well that plays in Congress.
Yeah, one of the jokes I tell is, or it's not really a joke, it's maybe closer to the truth, but I say I have the 2 worst educational backgrounds to serve in Congress, because my undergraduate degree is in engineering, and engineers think with logic and reason, and my graduate degree is in forestry, and foresters look at long-term horizons. And those things aren't usually appreciated in Congress. Yeah. I grew up in an area that's got some wonderful forests, and I spent a lot of time outdoors as a kid, and I still spend a lot of time outdoors today. But really, I had a Sunday school teacher when I was growing up that was a World War II veteran, was a tail gunner on the Flying Fortresses. He was a member of the Bloody 100, who was one of the squadrons that did a lot of the bombing raids in Germany. And he was one of the guys that just came back and was thankful to be home. Yeah. Because a lot of his friends didn't get that opportunity. But he was also in the first forestry graduating class at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. And he was just kind of an iconic guy in my life when I was a kid. And he seemed to know everything about the forest, all the plants. And it was just fascinating to visit with him. So I had an inborn love for forestry, and I ended up doing engineering work, involved a lot in the forest products industry. And I had a goal to go back to graduate school, and I thought, why not go in forestry? And boy, it was a great decision to do that.
Yeah, cool. It's a different perspective in Congress than the other 534 there. And I think this, was your forestry background a big impetus for Fix Our Forests Act?
Yeah, forest policy is something I've been working on since I've been in Congress since 2015. And it's taken a long time to change minds and hearts about forestry. But in that period of time, we've seen an enormous increase in not only the frequency, but the intensity of wildfires. And it's an issue that keeps moving further and further up the priority list for the country. And we finally got the opportunity to work on it in a bipartisan manner, and started with a bill called the Save Our Sequoias Act that Scott Peters, a Democrat from California, and I worked on together. we lost 20% of the giant sequoias on the planet in 2 years due to catastrophic wildfire. And they only grow in about 70 groves in California. And that's the only place on the planet that's their native range. And because of wildfire, in a 2 year period, we lost 20% of them. And then the giant sequoias that, the iconic ones that have been named, we're losing those at a rapid pace too. And we're seeing deterioration because of fires that may not have killed the trees, but have greatly damaged them. They're such an iconic species that really got people's attention and started looking into it. There's a lot of research that shows why that happened. And Scott was such a great partner on that bill. And even though we didn't get it passed and signed into law, it laid the groundwork for doing the Fix Our Forest Act. We passed it in the last Congress with huge bipartisan support in the House. Didn't go anywhere in the Senate, but as we were gearing up for this Congress, those devastating fires were happening in Los Angeles. It again brought forest management to the forefront, and we actually passed the bill out of the House again with even more Democrat co-sponsors. Every Republican in the House voted for it. And we ended up, if everybody had been there voting that had co-sponsored the bill and voted for it last Congress, we would have had a 2/3 vote on the bill. So like a suspension type of bill on major forest policy changes. And because of that, it's over in the Senate, and we've got bipartisan support in the Senate. I really believe it's going to get across the finish line and end up on President Trump's desk.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're proud of that achievement. There's not, it's hard to get a bill to have that much bipartisan support these days. And it's something that I know you probably and probably with Scott Peters, like you guys worked hard on it.
Yeah, well, I think if you can get people to look at the research and really consider the facts, and then you're dealing with something that's like these giant sequoias are not replaceable, not in our lifetime. Some of them are over 3,000 years old. So it really gets people's attention when we started losing the sequoias, and then if you drive through Yosemite or some of our other iconic places in the country and you see all the dead trees and the fire damage, it's hard to turn a blind eye to that. And then when you look at the research and you know that there's a better way to do it, that helps. And then, unfortunately, it seems to take some big wildfire to really catch the media's attention and get the American public's attention. And that happened in a massive way with those fires in Los Angeles.
Yeah. The bill's pretty exhaustive. Do you have like three things or any personal favorites of the legislation? That might be like trying to pick your favorite child.
That might be a good analogy, but there's a lot of really good ideas in the bill. One thing that has hampered forest management is the weaponization of well-meaning environmental laws and using the court system to stop actions from happening. One case I've tried to make, especially on forest management, that no decision is a management decision because forests are dynamic and they're always changing. So if you say it's going to be hands off, we're not going to do anything except put the fire out when it starts, then you made a management decision. There is not a no action alternative when it comes to forest management because we are making a decision when you say we're not going to take any action. So the wise thing to do is to take actions that are based on research and decades or centuries of data that we have on how forests work, on the way they grow, and on the way you generate new forests. And that's really what we've got in the bill, and we've tried to insulate that from judicial review and lawsuits that are aimed just to stop actions from happening. And oftentimes these are actions that have had years of planning put into them before they're ever implemented.
And so you mentioned it's on now on the Senate side. It has bipartisan Senate support. What do you have any idea of what that timeline might look like, or what, the senators need to do to push this across the finish line?
Oh, I think the process is moving in the Senate. The fact that the senators have filed their own bill and it's got bipartisan co-sponsors on it. You got Senator Padilla and Hickenlooper on the Democrat side, and Senator Sheehy and Curtis on the Republican side. So it's already got good bipartisan support. They've had some hearings in the Senate. It's a Senate Ag Committee, which Senator Bozeman from Arkansas is the chairman of that committee, and he's been very helpful, and he understands the issue as well. But also, one thing that I know is going to be important to your listeners, and another thing that's helping drive the conversation is what's happening to insurance and insurance rates in Western states. I made a trip out with young Kim to Orange County last fall, and we had some kind of town hall meetings. They've just been through the airport fire. The ability to get insurance, homeowners insurance in California is harder and harder. I mean, I've got some data here where it says Allstate stopped issuing new insurance in 2022 and increased premiums on existing policies last year by 34%. Between 2020 and 2022, insurance companies declined to renew 2.8 million homeowner insurance policies in California. The state approved a 17% increase in state farm insurance premiums due to wildfires earlier this year, on top of increases homeowners have already faced over the past few years. Those kind of things get people's attention. It gets voters' attention. It gets political leaders' attention. I know after the campfire up in Paradise, wasn't expecting this, but I ended up in a meeting with a lot of insurance companies trying to figure out how to fix the problem with forest fires, because their actuaries were telling them, if you're going to sell insurance out here, here's what your premiums have to be, which they knew was going to push prices out of people's range to be able to pay them. The last thing they wanted to do was have to pull out of a big market like that. So nobody wins if the insurance company can't afford to sell insurance and the homeowners can't afford to buy insurance. And then you've got these valuable properties that are uninsured. So this is a huge problem. And I'm using California as an example, but we're seeing insurance rate increases in my state, which is not necessarily due to catastrophic wildfires, but those costs get spread all across the country.
They do. They do. And yeah, we definitely, being independent commercial brokers that work with the big carriers, their clients see it, obviously the homeowner side, but you see it on the commercial side as well. And so I think that's why the industry, is able to support this legislation, because there is a lot of data behind it, and because it does some of the things that we've always touted that need to be done. We're really excited to see this move forward, and want to thank you for your leadership on it. And, ending this podcast, we always ask, two questions of our participants. And being a chairman, you kind of already have an answer built in, but what's a member of Congress that you work well with, from the other side of the aisle?
Yeah, if I can have one thing on our previous discussion.
Yeah, of course.
Trees are phenomenal. I think they really are a gift from God. We can't live without trees because of the process of photosynthesis, where they breathe in carbon dioxide and they breathe out oxygen, and they store that carbon in the tree. I mean, our life depends on plants, and particularly on trees and healthy forests. Trees also are critical to having clean water, to having wildlife habitat, to providing economic benefits. So when we have a healthy forest, everybody wins. When we have an unhealthy forest, everybody loses. So it seems like it should be a no-brainer that we would all work towards having a healthy forest and using everything we know about how to make that happen, to make it happen. And to get back to your question on who work well with across the aisle, I've already talked about Scott Peters, and he's been just a tremendous partner on putting together this forestry bill. But there's quite a few people on the other side of the aisle that I enjoy working with. Got Josh Geiheimer, Jimmy Panetta, and now I'm going to leave somebody out when I start calling.
That's okay. We won't tell them.
Yeah, but Tom Swazi, Jim Costa. There's just a lot of people who are wanting to do the right things, not just on forestry, but on other issues as well. I don't think the American public realizes that there are a lot of people who aren't just wanting to be on TV every other day, that they're really here trying to solve problems on both sides of the aisle.
The last question that we ask, and then we'll let you get back to defending forests. What are the top issues that you hear from your constituents when you're back home?
It depends on what the issue of the day is.
Yeah.
Some people, it's going to be what they saw on the cable TV show the night before. But when you're talking about serious policy discussions, right now it's coming down to, everybody's talking about the reconciliation bill and what's in that with tax policy and all the other provisions. But long term, it's permitting reform. And, we get a lot of visitors that come through our offices in DC, and I've been talking to other members about this as well. But it seems like every other meeting is someone that wants to talk about permitting reform. And a lot of what's in the Fix Our Forest Act is permitting reform. It's allowing our federal land managers to do their job and to not get mired down in the bureaucracy of the permitting laws that have been weaponized over the years.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. You don't always hear about bipartisanship on the news, and so we are excited, eager, thrilled to be offering it to you this way. If you'd like to hear more, visit leadersedge.com.